Good afternoon. So, if you follow me on any of the different social media accounts that I have in connection with the History Underground YouTube channel, you know that one of the things that I like to do is throw out recommendations of other YouTube channels that I'm watching or other podcasts. I'm as much of a fan of other people's work as I am, a creator. And a while back, I started, recommending different podcasts, and I noticed a trend that every time I would recommend a podcast of whatever kind, whether it's a Civil War podcast, World War I or World War II, I always had people chiming in the comments telling me that I needed to start listening to the Unauthorized History of the Pacific War podcast. And it got to the point where it was like borderline harassment that I was getting from people saying that I needed to listen to this podcast. So I eventually jumped on the train. I think probably I was a late arrival to the Unauthorized History of the Pacific War. And I think it was around episode 100, 120, somewhere in that neighborhood. And it quickly became one of my favorite podcasts. As a matter of fact, if you were to take a look at the number of hours that I have spent listening to all the different podcasts, I'm guessing this one is going to be close to number one. So this past summer, had a chance to go to Japan. And while I was there, really saw some things that I don't know, got the wheels turning and made me want to learn a little bit more about, especially the Japanese side of the Pacific War. And I thought, hey, maybe we can put together like a little guide of a who's who in the Pacific War. So, with that being said, let me go ahead and bring in a couple guys who need no introduction. We've got Seth and John from the Unauthorized History of the Pacific War podcast. I appreciate you guys carving out some time to jump on here and talk a little World War II with us today.
Absolutely.
Thanks for having us.
And I'm glad that our highly motivated core of highly paid harassers reached out and
the nerderati, as we call them. We call them the nerderati.
You have a highly motivated fan base. They're great, and after getting into the podcast, I can 100% see why that is.
Well, thank you very much.
Yeah.
So what we're going to be doing here today is kind of going through a bit of a who's who in the Pacific War, both on the American side and the Japanese side. I think you guys can chime in and agree or disagree. It seems to me that when it comes to World War II, if you're looking at just like a casual World War II enthusiast, that people seem to have at least a little bit more of a connection or a little bit more of an understanding with some of the major players in the European theater over the Pacific. I know you guys are deep in the weeds, with the Pacific War, but I don't know. Is that a fair assessment?
Oh yeah, I think so. Certainly, just from the standpoint of books getting sold, ETO books outsell PTO books probably 4-1 or something like that.
Wow.
So, yeah,
and there's more of them too. You'll find 10 ETO books to one Pacific book, and I mean, it was kind of the thing during the war too. I mean, most, not all, but most of the newspaper coverage in the United States, even while things were going on simultaneously, the headlines were Europe, not the Pacific. Yeah. I mean, there were certain instances where that was reversed, but 9 times out of 10 it was European. So I would like to think that if we had an unauthorized history of the European war, which ain't happening, that we'd probably have 10 times the amount of followers that we do, because of the fact that people are like, ooh, let's talk about Normandy for the 317,000th time.
Right.
Because, that's the only thing that happened in 1944 is Normandy, right?
Yeah.
Anyway. I imagine a lot of that has to do with just more familiarity with Europe.
Sure.
If it's 1944 and you're reading the newspaper and there's a headline about the Allies, are marching through Paris. I imagine you're like, okay, yeah, cool, Paris.
100%.
If you read about,
the Marines marching through Garapan, they're like,
yeah,
who's Garapan?
Yeah. I listened to an old radio podcast, radio address with Franklin Roosevelt, one of his fireside chats. Mm-hmm. And he's getting ready to talk about what's going on in the Pacific, and he encourages the listeners. He says, okay, now get out a map because we're going to be talking about some different places.
No, that's right. And I think there's two things going on there. One is just a cultural affiliation. Most people in North America can trace their ancestry back to, somebody who came over from Europe. And that's not necessarily the case, except on the West Coast of the U.S. with the majority of the population. And the other is just the sheer number of troops that were committed there. Sure. That there are a lot of, got a lot of soldiers and airmen over in Europe as opposed to what's in the Pacific. Although our mutual friend John McManus would hasten to add that by 1944, you've got 1.7 million Army troops in the Pacific, which is a pretty large group of soldiers. But nevertheless, ETO gets the press.
Here's what prompted this for me and why I wanted you guys to come on. So over the summer, as I mentioned earlier, I had had an opportunity to go to Japan. And John, I know that you just got back from Japan.
About 3 weeks ago. Yeah.
And while I was there, I had the opportunity to go to, is it the Yushikan Museum?
Yeah.
Okay. So the Yushikan Museum in Tokyo, this is a rather interesting place. And I don't know, John, they have kind of a unique interpretation of the Second World War.
You could call it that. Yeah. You could also call it a proto right-wing fascist interpretation if you wanted to. It's extremely revisionist.
You said it, not me.
Yeah. I've been there multiple times. Yeah. When you see the placards that talk about Japan's quest to avoid a war, it's like, okay, So that's a museum where we take our guests on some of the tours that I lead, and they come out of that museum at the end of that and their heads are exploding because they are not getting the interpretational spin that they are used to. That is for sure.
Yeah. So my wife was with me on that trip, and we got to the section where they're talking about Pearl Harbor and everything like that. Yeah. And, I'm sitting there filming and everything like that. And she comes up to me and she knows a little bit about World War II and everything. But she comes up to me and she said, "Hey, are you seeing this? Is this right?" And I was like, "Oh, I don't know. It's just a different interpretation." Here's one thing that did spark my interest there at the museum is seeing the people who they elevate as like their heroes of the war. They're John Bassilones and they're Audie Murphys. And it made me realize, man, most people, you might know Yamamoto. Okay. People know the name Tojo, maybe Nagumo. Beyond that, people probably don't know a whole lot as far as the Japanese players in the Second World War. So anyway, that's what the spark was for this conversation today. So I guess we got quite a bit to go through, and I want to be respectful of your time. So we'll go ahead and jump right in here. So what we're going to do is bounce back and forth between American commanders and Japanese. We're going under the assumption that people know MacArthur and people know Nimitz and things like that. So these might be some of the maybe mid-level players. Maybe not quite as known. Known to some, but not to all. So anyway, let's go ahead and just dive in here. So
sounds great.
First up on the list, Walter Kruger.
Yep.
Tell me a little bit about Walter Kruger and where he fits into the whole narrative.
So Kruger's one of MacArthur's Army commanders. He's 6th Army commander. So Kruger is going to be the head banana for a lot of Mac's spear point assaults across the the South Pacific into the Philippine area. As a matter of fact, he's going to lead his army is going to lead the invasion of Leyte and Luzon specifically, among others. And Kruger was highly, he was well thought of by MacArthur for several reasons, not the least of which is he usually won, which helps. But Mac also had a penchant sometimes for sticking with people that kind of caused him a pain. And this Walter Kruger is one of those people.
Yeah.
Kruger was exceedingly methodical.
Yep.
And very, very slow in his advances. He was a soldier's general. He literally came up from the ranks. You know, his family was from Germany. He was from Germany.
Yeah.
And he closely identified with the enlisted man, which is a very good thing. It's a rare thing for somebody wearing stars, Army or Navy. But he identified with the enlisted men, and he deeply cared for the enlisted men. Yet at the same time, some of the actions that he did or did not do wound up getting those same guys that he deeply cared for into scrapes that they maybe didn't need to get into. So, you know, his biggest thing was the thing that galled Mac more than anything about Kruger was that he was slow. He was exceedingly slow in his advances. And another guy we're going to talk about later was the complete opposite of that. But yeah, Kruger was he was a good general, but he drew the ire of MacArthur, specifically in Luzon, when they were headed towards Manila.
Yeah, really methodical advance. Yeah.
And good.
I was just going to say too that. I'm sorry. He had good relations with the enlisted men in his army. He did not necessarily get along all that well with either his staff officers or some of other cohorts at his same level. And yeah, we're going to be talking about one of them down the road. But he is a pretty remarkable guy when you think about it. I mean, this is a guy who came into the army as a private, and he's going to end up, wearing 4 stars and was not a graduate of a military academy either. That we will probably never see a guy like this again in the history of the U.S. military. He wasn't
a college graduate either, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah.
Oh, really?
That's correct. Yeah,
wow.
Not a college grad, and English is not his native language, and yet he was self-educated, turned into quite a scholar, wrote papers in professional journals. He was a very, very sharp individual, and obviously a very good soldier. But yeah, he's going to get into trouble on Luzon when he just does not get into Manila as quickly as he otherwise probably could have.
So do you think that MacArthur's criticism of him was fair? Because MacArthur, I mean, of course, has a reputation for being a little bit unhinged, and with his his opinions and with his assessments. Is this one where he gets it right, or was he kind of unfair to Kruger, do you think?
No, he was 100% right in crawling up Kruger's backside. The thing with Mac is that I've said this forever. 1941 through 1943, he acted like a petulant child because the only thing he wanted to do was get to the Philippines. Yeah. All he wanted to do. Once he gets there, it's hard to find fault with anything that MacArthur does, save one. And keeping this dude in charge of the main drive to Manila is that one thing, because he crawled up Kruger's backside daily on the drive to Manila and was like, go, go, damn it. Put both feet on the gas and go. And anybody, if you look at any kind of operation done by Mac's army, prior to Luzon, there was one cat that should have been in charge. If you wanted to race to Manila and get there yesterday, Walter Kruger is not your man. And MacArthur knew that. So it's like, it's one of those things where it's kind of bamboozling as to why.
Why'd you put him in charge in the first place?
If he's goes at the pace of a snail and you want to get there now, he ain't your dude.
Yeah. I was going to say, understand too, that there's an underlying subtext here in that if we could get to Manila a lot faster than we ended up doing, it's possible that the Battle of Manila, which was absolutely horrific, the heaviest urban combat in the Pacific, which ends up killing 100,000 Filipino civilians in the course of that, if we could have forestalled some of that by getting to Manila sooner, so that Admiral, it's Iwabuchi, I believe,
Iwabuchi Sonji,
does not have the opportunity to fortify the interior of Manila as heavily as he did, we might have prevented some of those civilian casualties. And we damn sure should have tried.
That's like some people have said, oh, they were building fortifications in Manila before we landed, to a degree, but not in the way that they did when Kruger was crawling to Manila.
Right.
I mean, they really kicked it into high gear. And if you look at the executions and the murders, the rapes and the pillaging and everything else, that occurs really once our people get into Manila. So to John's point, had we arrived there, I don't know, a week before, which we totally could have done, I'm not saying that people wouldn't have gotten massacred or killed, but probably not to the degree in which they did.
Yeah.
So,
Anyway.
All right.
Next.
We have quite a few to go through here. So again, this is just kind of a crash course on some of these players here. So we'll bounce back and forth between American and Japanese.
This dude,
and
the Tiger of Malaya.
The Tiger of Malaya.
Which he hated that name, by the way. He hated that name.
Yeah, he did. Yamashita is the commander of Japan's 25th Army during the Malayan campaign at the very beginning of the war, which starts on December 8th, which is actually, it starts about an hour and a half before the attack against Pearl Harbor. The Japanese are landing troops in Malaya to drive down that peninsula, with the ultimate goal being Singapore. Yamashita is the son of a doctor in a little town out in the sticks in Shikoku Island. He is extremely bright. He graduates very high in his class at the Japanese Army Academy. And this dude is a fire breather. He is arguably Japan's best general from an offensive standpoint, I would say. And he's been handed 25th Army, which has been tailor-made for this 600-mile campaign down the length of Malaya. It's a highly mobile formation by Japanese standards. It's got a lot of engineers. It's got a lot of separate heavy artillery as well. And critically, also, it has 3 independent tank regiments. And so this is kind of the Japanese equivalent of, what you might think of as a German motorized corps. They got all the fixins in this thing. And Yamashita is a hard-handed taskmaster. He is just constantly cracking the whips on his subordinate commanders. He's got 2 very good divisions under his aegis, 5th and 18th, as well as the Imperial Guards Division, which was not battle-tested, but 5th and 18th were both really good divisions. And the result is just a catastrophe for the British. Yamashita defeats the British in 3 crucial battles up in Malaya, the first being at Jitra in early December, the next being the Battle of Slim River in early January, which is just disastrous. And finally, the Battle of Muar, where he defeats the Australian 8th Division as well. He's going to end up then capturing Singapore on February the 15th, 1942. And the result of that entire campaign is that the British are going to suffer something on the order of 138,000 casualties.
Wow.
Churchill calls it their greatest military defeat in British history. And Yamashita's the dude that made it happen. So he's something. It's kind of what it comes down to. And he is then going to end up in the Philippines at the end of the war. He's going to be one of the opponents of Walter Kruger. He's going to be in the northern part of Luzon. So go ahead, Seth.
No, I was going to say you see him again. He's pushed off to the sidelines after Malaya, but he's resurrected, if you will, in 44. Yeah. And technically his first action against the Americans is on Leyte. He's on Leyte. He's not, but troops that are theoretically under his aegis are on Leyte. The only criticism I have about Yamashita late war, and I don't know if this is, John's the expert on Malaya, not I, but is that he got to be a little wishy-washy later in the war. Count Tarochi, who wanted to siphon off people from Lausanne and put them on Leyte, and Yamashita's like, don't do that. Don't just let them have Leyte, and we'll fight them, tooth and nail on Lausanne.
Yeah.
And Tarochi's like, nah, I'm going to take him. And Yamashita admittedly couldn't put up too much of a fight, but he didn't.
Yeah.
And then when you get to Lausanne, Iwabuchi, he's Navy, but he falls under the command of Yamashita, and it's, the whole rape of Manila thing, it's basically Iwabuchi giving Yamashita the middle finger, and Yamashita didn't do anything about it.
Right.
And so it's like, you might have been this fire breather in 42, but in 44, somebody put out the fire, because it wasn't all there.
Yeah.
Now he's going to end up being executed for war crimes at the end of the war.
Yeah.
Maybe talk and to the degree that you can you talk about that a little bit? Was this something that you think was
justified? You bet.
Justified.
Absolutely. Yeah, because the same thing happened to a lesser degree during the Malayan campaign as well. That when the Japanese took Singapore, they end up executing what we call the Sukching massacres, which killed anywhere between 20 and 50,000 ethnic Chinese within Singapore. Oh yeah, it's bad.
I've never heard of this.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Well, it's funny because if you talk to anybody who grows up in Singapore, they're just bathed in this from their childhood. There's no evidence that Yamashita was directly responsible for that, but it's clear that his planning officer, a guy named Tsuji Masanobu, was deeply involved, as was General Nishimura, who was the commander of the Imperial Guards Division. So, Yamashita was not executing proper oversight of his army, and the result was a hideous massacre. And the same thing then ends up happening in the Philippines as well. He should have sent staff officers down to Admiral Iwabuchi in Manila and said, your troops are leaving the city as I ordered you to do, or I'm relieving you of command. Get GTFO. But that did not happen. So I don't think that Yamashita was necessarily that great a human being. And I have no quibbles with him being hung after the war, but he was a tremendous general.
Yeah. Something kind of interesting before we move on to the next one. So I have a series on the channel called American Artifact, where we show artifacts in the collection, the Gettysburg Museum of History. All of these guys brought home some pretty unique souvenirs. And we have something in the collection that is a souvenir that a guy brought back who was at the execution, and he brought back a section of the rope that Yamashita was hanged with.
Wow.
Yeah.
Interesting.
All right. So let's move on.
There he is.
To the man.
Yeah.
Robert Eichelberger. I don't think you can say Eichelberger without conjuring up John McManus. I'm expecting him to pop up in the chat any second now. Tell me about Eichelberger.
He is my favorite U.S. Army general of all time. He, not just World War II, but just all time. He was an incredibly intelligent man. He was a deep, deep thinker. He was passionately in love with his wife. All generals and admirals have, a significant amount of hubris, but he had probably less than most.
Yeah.
He did not worry about getting hurt. He did not worry about exposing himself to fire. He firmly believed, recklessly brave, to be honest. He was one of those guys that, didn't care if he took fire. He wasn't going to, let me hang out in the rear. He wanted to be up in the front with his people. He wanted to direct the fight. You first hear of him in New Guinea, but he really earns his keep up through New Guinea into the Philippines. And by the time of, oh goodness me, after Leyte, he's in charge of 8th Army for Luzon. That This dude is the guy that should have been leading the charge to Manila, because Eichelberger moved with both feet on the gas 24 hours a day, 8 days a week. I mean, he was just going all the time, because he, from like his good friend who was General George S. Patton, they were partners, and they used to like write letters back and forth during the war. Eichelberger believed that I can save American lives by getting this over with now.
Yeah.
As opposed to Kruger, who's like, I can save American lives by crawling and taking my time.
Yeah.
But, but Eichelberger was 2 feet on the gas. There's a story of him. He takes over Biak. He comes into Biak, and he basically, and he knew, he'd heard radio intercepts that, or not intercepts, but he'd heard the radio transmissions, knowing he was going over there to go rescue this situation that had turned to a
and for the sake of our listeners, Biak happens in like August of 1944, and there's been a shift in Japanese tactics right after the loss of the Marianas Islands, where the Japanese were trying to kick our landing forces actually back into the ocean. With the failure to do that in the Marianas, the Japanese army changes its tactics to, okay, everybody's got to play for time, dig in, no banzai charges anymore, make sure that you bleed the Americans white. And Biak and Peleliu are going to be the first 2 instantiations of that. So yeah, Eichelberger gets to rescue, the landings in Biak, which have turned into a dumpster fire.
There's a funny story when he gets there. So he knows he's going to be called. He knows he's coming into the rescue. The Lone Ranger's coming.
Yeah.
And when he arrives, like the day that he arrives via aircraft, he immediately gets in a Jeep and he's like, bring me to the front line. So he goes to the front line. He's got his entourage with him, which is, a Jeep full, 2 Jeeps, him and his staff, and another Jeep with some staff and some riflemen with him. Anyway, they get up to literally to the front line, and it's over like a cliff.
Yeah.
And he climbs a tree to see down onto the battlefield, because they're looking down onto the dude climbs a tree, falls out the damn tree. And I'm not talking like falls like 6 foot. I'm talking like down the cliff. I mean, not, 100 feet or anything stupid like that. But he falls down the cliff like, probably a good 15 feet or so. And all the staff was like, oh my God, what? Jeez, good God, is he dead? Is he okay? And they literally look down, and there he is. No kidding. And he's like, I'm good. I'm cool. I'm just, somebody throw me a rope. Let me get me the hell out of here. But that was the kind of guy he was. Yeah. That was the kind of dude he was. And he hated Walter Kruger.
Yeah, they did not get a
passion.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Because he served under Kruger in New Guinea, and he detested Walter Kruger with a passion. He hated him. Couldn't stand him.
So yeah, MacArthur's got his 2 main army commanders just can't get along at all.
They hate each other.
Yeah, they hate each other. Which, is not that unusual, I guess. You can certainly find other examples of that too. But anyway.
He does, Eichelberger does most of the fighting in the Philippines too. 8th Army does, because 6th Army gets the accolades for Leyte and most of Luzon, and they did take most of Luzon. I mean, that's undeniable. But the majority of the remainder of the archipelago is taken by Robert Eichelberger's 8th Army.
Yeah,
they see far more combat in the Philippines than Kruger's 6th ever did. And he kind of gets forgotten, and he shouldn't be, because he was amazing. And of course, he was going to have a big 8th Army was going to have a big role in the invasion of Japan, but obviously didn't occur. So.
Yeah. Who we got next?
All right.
Oh man,
what we got on Nagumo?
Shuichi Nagumo. He is the commander of Japan's carrier force early in the war. A lot of people have probably heard about this guy. He's the commander in charge of Pearl Harbor. He's also in charge of Midway, and he's not going to be shuffled out to pasture until after the Battle of Eastern Solomons. Nagumo, in my opinion, is something of a semi-tragic figure in that he is a cruiser commander, a surface warfare expert by training, and yet he ends up getting put in charge of the world's finest carrier force. That's what Japan had in its hands at the end of 1941, and yet this is a guy that doesn't necessarily have a real affinity for that weapon system, doesn't really understand it fully, and that means that he's got to lean on other staff officers around him, guys like his chief of staff Kusaka, and of course Minoru Genda, who is the air officer for First Air Fleet. And Nagumo is going to end up getting pilloried, of course, for the loss at Midway. There are a lot of fingers that get pointed at this guy that, he made mistakes here, he made mistakes there. If there's one thing that I hope that my book on Midway, Shattered Sword, tried to dispel, it was this notion that Nagumo made egregious mistakes. I would say that he made mistakes that were congruent with Japanese doctrine at the time. And you got to understand that when you get to the Battle of Midway, we've only fought 2 carrier battles at this point, Coral Sea and Midway. So both sides are working from really thin playbooks, I guess, is the analogy I would use, which means that when Nagumo gets into a pickle around this notion of, should I be rearming my aircraft or should I be, trying to attack the Americans that I've just discovered? What do I do here? He ends up making a decision which is doctrinally congruent, but turns out ex post facto not to have been so good. So he ends up on the island of Saipan during the Battle of Marianas. He's the commander of the naval garrison there. He will end up committing suicide on Saipan, and close to his body, we will end up recovering his after action report for the Midway battle, which is then translated by the Office of Naval Intelligence in 1947, and that becomes one of the main primary sources that we historians work with when we're talking about the Battle of Midway, is what's known as the Nagumo report, which was captured on Saipan.
Oh, wow. I didn't know that.
There you go. Yep. So that's my man Nagumo.
All right.
Roy
Geiger.
got a lot of good. Yeah, go for it.
Seth. I was going to say Roy Geiger. Roy Geiger's, again, I see. You hear sound like a broken record. One of my favorites, but he is
good dude.
Super good dude. Biggest thing, Roy. Obviously he's an aviator. You see the wings on his chest right there.
Mm-hmm.
He cuts his combat teeth, if you will, in World War II on Guadalcanal.
Yep.
And he's commanding. This is after. Oh goodness, I just drew a blank. Where's Dave? This is after the first air commander, and I can't think of his name. It just went boop right out the side of the ear here. Anyway, Geiger comes in to replace him.
Yeah.
And Geiger starts, basically learning how to operate with multiple people, multiple different personalities, multiple different nationalities, multiple different ways of doing things. Go ahead.
Yeah, this is the first truly joint command in U.S. military history, because the Cactus Air Force, as it comes to be known, or Air Sols, as it would be called down there, is composed of Navy squadrons, Marine squadrons, Army Air Force squadrons. Some New Zealanders get in there eventually too. And Geiger is the cat who is going to orchestrate all of that and get these people all to work together. And he's really, really good at it. So, I just tremendous respect for Geiger. He's going to go on to be commander of 3rd Amphibious Corps later on in the war. He's going to oversee the invasion of the island of Guam. And there's a real contrast there between 3 Corps and 5 Amphibious Corps, whose commander is Holland Smith. There's this famous blow up on Saipan, the Smith versus Smith debacle, and Smith can't get along with the Army guys worth a damn, yada, yada, yada. Fast forward and you look at the campaign on Guam. Roy Geiger is riding herd over that, and the Army and the Marines get along famously. So, what's that say?
Exactly.
Yeah.
My only beef with Geiger is, and to John's point, is 100% correct, because the Army commanders, one of which we'll talk about later, Andrew Bruce, thought Geiger walked on water. He loved him. But my only beef with Geiger is that he kind of farts around when it comes to Peleliu and goes to Rupertus and is like, hey, you know what? We probably ought to get these Army 81st guys on here to help you guys out. And Rupertus, of course, stubbornly is like, no, my Marines can take it. Well,
yeah.
After you kill your division, maybe. But Geiger, he waited a little long to finally just drop the hammer and was like, nope, here they come. The 81st is coming. And you're doing it because I told you to. And, had he done that maybe a little earlier, things wouldn't have ended up. And he knew. And the thing was, and that's where I gig him, is that he knew the casualty rates on Peleliu. So it's not like it was foreign to him.
Yeah.
It wasn't a surprise.
Because he went ashore on D+3, I believe, and was at headquarters of 1st Marine Division and also the 1st Marine Regiment, where Chesty Puller is in charge of that. And if you read the official Marine Corps histories, this is absolutely apparent that Geiger knows that both Rupertus and Puller are exhausted and sick and not making good decisions. And so, I think you're right, Seth, that could have dropped the hammer a little sooner than he ended up doing.
That's my only beef is that really.
Yeah. Well, the other kind of fun factoid about him is after General Buckner is killed on the battle in Kanawha, Geiger takes over in command of 10th Army, and so he is going to be the only U.S. Marine in the history of the U.S. military to actually run a field army of the U.S. military.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. True fact.
Cool.
Yeah.
Now you mentioned William.
There he is.
So you already kind of alluded to it. To Peleliu, there's some issues with Rupertus.
Well, go ahead.
I was going to say Rupertus. He's an old salt. He's an old salt. He's on Vandergrift's staff.
Yeah.
For Guadalcanal. I forget what. Again, where's Dave? But he's on Vandergrift's staff for Guadalcanal.
He's the assistant divisional commander.
Thank you, because he takes over division for Gloucester. Yeah,
didn't he command Task Force Yoke that went and invaded Tulagi and
Gavutu
and Tanabogo?
Yes, he did.
That's right.
And he.
The interesting part here is if you look at the staff of Vandergrift for 1st Marine Division during the Battle of Guadalcanal, that is like a murderer's row of dudes that are going to go on to make, general or colonel or what have you. This is a seriously good staff, and yet there are a couple of duds in there, and Rupertus, I think, turns out to be one of those.
100% agree. He takes over the division once Vandergrift goes home after Guadalcanal, and he's in charge of the division that kicked Gloucester. And when they land for Gloucester, he does okay. But Gloucester, with the exception of a few spots here and there, was a relatively combat light campaign. It was not the drawn out process of Guadalcanal, although guys that were on Gloucester said it was 10 times more miserable than Guadalcanal because of the rain and just gross. But most of the fighting on Gloucester is done by his regimental commanders, like guys like Lew Walt, who, are just magnificent human beings and really, really, really good commanding officers. So it's not, Rupertus doesn't have his fingers, he's his fingers in it, but he doesn't really have a whole lot of, he leaves it to his regimental commanders and lets them do their thing.
Yeah.
And he does the same thing or very similar thing when he goes to Peleliu, especially with Chesty Puller.
Yeah.
And, he just seemingly has this stone block in his head is like, my Marines are going to take this. And I understand service pride. I do. But it's like, dude, if 10 people are telling you you're drunk, you hand over the keys, my man. Yeah. You don't just get in the car and drive. Which is true. It's true, though. And if you've got, all these other guys saying, kind of need some help up here.
Right.
Or you got Roy Geiger saying, you probably should take this help up here. He gets a lot of Marines killed on Peleliu, I think, needlessly.
He does.
Is the bottom line. That's the bottom. And him and Chesty Puller, too, for that matter. But that's the bottom line.
Yeah, and sort of the other takeaway from that is we always associate with Peleliu being a Marine Corps fight. It's the Army's 81st Infantry Division that takes that stupid island. Even to this day, there's a memorial on the top of Five Sisters. I've been to Peleliu twice or three times, and you can get up to this memorial that's on top there to one of the two regiments from 81st ID that that fought on the island, and you got to go up this rickety set of stairs. These are not OSHA compliant stairs. But you get up to the top and you're on this almost like a tree house. It's because it's a really tall hill. And so you're looking down on one side and you're looking into Wildcat Bowl. You look down the other side, you're looking into Death Valley. It's all tree covered at this point too. But the monument up there is this obelisk, which really is kind of an extended middle finger, just like 2, 3, 4 regiment, we took this effing hill is kind of what it comes down to. And it could have happened sooner if Rupertus had, just been a little less pig-headed about it and just let the army come on shore because he needed those troops.
Yeah, and I don't. Go ahead, JD. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I didn't say not that it would have mattered anyway, because the Marines always tended to get the press,
Right.
As it is. So even if he would have let the army come in and help, the Marines were still probably going to get their due credit.
Yeah.
He is. I forget which one of you guys said it, but he is sick. Like there's something physically wrong with the man, even before Peleliu, and I think it's like shortly before. But he goes home. He's relieved, after Peleliu. He goes home and he dies of a heart attack. I think in March of 1945.
Yeah.
So he, and I mean, one could say that Peleliu probably killed him too.
Yeah.
And I think that's probably accurate. But
I think that'd be fair. Who's next?
All right, now this next guy, I'm here to learn. I know nothing about.
Nobody knows.
Neither do I. I don't know this guy.
Right? Nobody knows this guy. He is the commander of Japan's 15th Army at the beginning of the war, and he is going to execute the Burma campaign. And a fair number of people who are familiar with the Pacific War will look at, somebody like Yamashita. They know who Yamashita is. Nobody knows Aida. And his campaign is arguably just as brilliant as Yamashita's. He comes in, he's got 2 divisions that he's going to be working with in the first half of this campaign, the 55th and 33rd. 33rd is just, what a great outfit. Their commanding general is a guy named Sakurai, who's just one of these spring tight, fast marching, just hit him in the chops kind of aggressive generals. And so Aida is going to use the 33rd as kind of his A team throughout this campaign. But yeah, he comes into this campaign, he's only got 2 divisions, and each of those divisions is only fielding 2 of their 3 regiments. And he just runs roughshod over the British Indian Army there. Famously, there's a battle at a place called the Satang River, where there's an Indian division that is on the east side of the Satang, which is a big, wide river. There's a railroad bridge across that river. They're trying to convert it so that they can drive their trucks across it because they've been defeated, in a couple places on the east side of Burma. And Sakurai sends one of his regiments of his 33rd Division, just cross-country marching through the jungle, mind you. And, they've got some native scouts that are working for them, but they are really fast, hard-marching troops. And they end up attacking that bridge while the British still have 3 brigades on the wrong side of the river. And at about 4 a.m, the divisional commander for the British is going to say, I don't even know if my brigades even still exist. I've got to blow the bridge so that I can prevent the Japanese from taking it. And he does that and traps the majority of his division on the wrong side of the river.
Oh,
disaster, So at the end of this campaign, Aida will have captured all of Burma, which is a big country. In fact, his troops march a longer distance than Yamashita's troops do, and they don't have the benefit of nearly as much motorized transport as Yamashita's army does. So this guy is operating on very flimsy supply lines, but he's capitalizing on just the speed and the aggression of his troops. Eventually, the Chinese are going to come into this campaign. The British very grudgingly, allow them to come in from China because trying to preserve the Burma Road that runs out of Lashio up to Kunming in China is the one last remaining land conduit for supplies to the nationalist Chinese government. And so this will be the stage debut of Stilwell, who's going to come in and command those Chinese troops. Stilwell is totally over his head. He underestimates the Japanese, thinks that they're ripe for a counterattack, and they crush the Chinese forces in Burma as well. And so the result of this campaign is going to be that William Slim and his army are going to be just basically run out of Burma and run up into the hills around Imphal in India. And the Chinese are going to be crushed and sent back into China proper. The British lose like 13,000 casualties. The Chinese lose something like 80,000. So they lose 6 times as many casualties fighting for a colony that isn't even theirs and that they were only grudgingly admitted to. So yeah, Aida is a badass is kind of what it comes down to. Anyway, there you go.
Yeah, that's one thing I love about y'all's podcast is you guys have covered some stuff like with China and Burma and things like that. Especially for Americans in World War II history, that's a black hole for most people.
I'm glad you brought that up, JD, and I don't want to go on. I don't want to. I'll push my soapbox to the side over here real quick. John knows I have a very big soapbox, but it's very tall. But sorry, but when he and I, when my former co-host Bill Tody had to step away, and John came aboard. Thank you again, as always, John. You know that.
Yeah.
He and I sat down. And we had a conversation. We had a Zoom conversation. We had phone calls. We had texts. We had emails. We're like, all right, what do we want to cover? How do we want to do this? And we took it from a different approach as Bill and I had done it in the past. And we still do a lot of the same things, a lot of personal aspects. But I was like, one of the things I wanted to do, and as soon as I said it, he's like, oh, God, yeah. It's like, I want to tell people how the hell we get to war. Yeah. The Japanese just didn't wake up one day and say, hey, you know what would be cool? Let's go attack Pearl Harbor and see what happens. It doesn't work like that.
Yeah.
There's a road. We said this through every episode we did from like 502 until now. The road to Pearl Harbor is not straight. It's like I can't think of the name of the street in San Francisco that does this.
Yeah.
But and when we sat down and said, okay, let's cover this, and this. And I even told him, I said, they're probably not going to get a lot of views because nobody knows what the hell we're talking about. Yeah. But it was fun. It was fun. It's important.
It's absolutely important. Just a little aside to that, how, Americans don't know much about, what happened in China and Burma and all those places. When I was in Japan, we went to the site that was the Imperial Japanese Naval Academy on Tajima. Yeah. So we were going on their tour, and there was one other guy on the tour who spoke English, and it was a Chinese guy. So he saw me with the camera and he started asking me, questions, and we started talking, and I was just gonna, on camera make a little joke that, hey, here's the only other guy that can't understand what is being said on this tour either. Mm-hmm. And he stopped me. He goes, "Oh, no. He said, please don't put me on camera." And I was like, "Oh, okay, yeah, no problem." And he said, "If people saw this on YouTube in my country, I could get in big trouble for being here." He said it would be a problem for me.
Fascinating.
Yeah. So even today, that tension between China and Japan over what happened is
for
very
sure.
fresh.
So just a side note, a personal note here, that museum at Etajima is actually kind of where my interest in the Imperial Navy resurrected itself. I've been crazy about the Imperial Navy as a kid, all the way up through college. I gave away all of my model kits, went off to college, and I was doing other stuff. When my wife and I got married, we moved to Hiroshima. We lived there for 9 months or something like that. And we had some friends up in the little town that we lived in, the Nomuras, who knew that I was kind of into the Japanese Navy. And so Nomura-san took me to that museum. And they have a wonderful kamikaze exhibit there, or they did.
Yeah.
And it was almost this physical thing that I was just like, I could feel all the IJN juices starting to burble up again, and fast forward, we moved back home. I got into business school. I put up my website on to the Japanese Navy, and the rest is literally history. So yeah, that museum holds fond associations for me. Glad you
Yeah,
got to see
I
it.
wish I could have filmed in there, but they were quite
Yeah,
firm about
yeah,
me keeping my camera put away.
yeah.
But man, you walk out of there with the impression that Yamamoto is God.
Right. Yeah,
They hold him in high regard there for
yeah, they
sure.
do.
All right,
Who's next?
let's go ahead and get back to it. So here's a guy that I like personally. Oh, Joseph Swing.
Do it, Seth.
First class badass.
Yeah.
He's seriously, he is a first class badass. He's a paratrooper. Obviously, you see the jump wings in the image. I know a lot. I work for the Army, for the United States Army, so I know a lot of paratroopers, and they all think that they're a reincarnation of Joseph Swing. They ain't, but they'd like to think that they are. No offense, boys. I know some of y'all are watching, so you can tell me about it when I see you again next week. But no, seriously, he was a great guy. He was one of these dudes that was just, he was a fire breather, like John was talking about Yamashita, but in a different way. And that, he, much like Robert Eichelberger, he felt that the quickest way to avoid American casualties is to get things done like yesterday.
Right.
And when he lands, and of course there's airborne operations in which he's a part of as well. But when he lands on, and by that I mean like physically lands on Luzon in the race to Manila, his people are flying. I mean, they are just ripping, and they're going so damn fast that Eichelberger, who is an advocate of speed, he can't keep up with them. Like he can't. He's like, where the hell are you now? And I mean, they're just flying through territory, and of course they reach the southeastern portion of the city, and they run into a stone wall. They do wind up penetrating, and they wind up getting inside Manila. They famously, Swing's people famously fight in the Manila. I don't remember the name of the stadium, but the baseball stadium that's in there. That's the paratroopers. One of his paratroopers was Rod Serling, of Twilight Zone fan. Rod Serling was one of Swing's people, but Joseph Swing is a really, really awesome guy. He sees combat on Leyte as well. He does one of the runs, the end around run through Ormoc, and we'll talk about the guy who actually does do that here in a little bit, Andrew D. Bruce. But Swing's a great guy. He's a great guy, hell of a commanding officer.
I know that, there's movies like A Bridge Too Far and everything like that elevated a lot of names. I wish that people knew Swing the way that they knew Jim Gavin or, Ridgway or Taylor, some of these other guys.
And I would just put in a plug here too for a friend's book, James Fenelon, who, great guy. He was my co-historian on the Japan tour I just wrapped up, and he wrote a book called Angels Against the Sun, which is about the 11th Airborne Division. It's a fine book, and he's got wonderful maps too, and just a good guy. So if you want to learn more about Joseph Swing, that would be a good book.
That would be one of my top recommendations there. Something else, kind of a little of an aside. My childhood doctor was a kid or a teenager in the Los Baños prison camp that the 11th Airborne liberated. His parents were missionaries, and when the Japanese overran the Philippines, they were held as prisoner there. So so it was Swing's boys who liberated my childhood doctor.
He had a big part in the design of that operation too. Swing did. So I mean, he's credited with saving, or you could technically credit him with saving a lot of American and Filipino lives in that particular, and other nationalities as well. But yeah, I'll put it this way: when he reaches in the inside of Manila and he runs into that stone wall, he probably saved more people and this is me just shooting from the hip. He probably saved more people in that 24-hour thunder run, which is essentially what it was, than the other guys coming from the 6th Army side because of their slow movements. And Swing he knew he knew that time was of the essence when it came to Manila, because he was told so by Eichelberger, who was told so by MacArthur. So Swing literally threw caution to the wind. He's like, just effing go, brother, and don't
Go.
stop.
Right.
So you hit something, you shoot it, and you just keep on trucking.
Yep.
And that's what they did. And he was an awesome guy. And
Yeah,
he brings them into Tokyo as well at what's the name of the air base?
I know that we all know
Atsugi?
1,000 different World War II stories that we think should be made into a movie. Man, the Los Baños raid, I think, would make such a great film.
Yeah.
But all right, we'll go ahead and move along here to Nakagawa.
Yeah. Colonel Kunio Nakagawa. He is he's the commander, the Japanese commander at Peleliu. And so this guy, in some ways, executes the most congruent response to Imperial Japanese Army's new orders to draw these battles out and bleed the Americans dry. Nakagawa's battle plan is just right on the money. So he's basically going to give up the beaches. He does fight on the beaches, but he does not put the bulk of his troops on the beaches in Peleliu. His real defensive redoubt is inside what's known as the Umerbrogel Mountains, which are basically a series of coral hills that have been shoved up out of the sea. They're incredibly steep. They are, having been there several times, they're really dizzying. It's easy to get turned around inside them. It's really tough to navigate them. And it's just perfect defensive terrain because the coral is soft enough that you can dig your own caves and also augment the ones that are already in place there. And the result is that the Umerbrogels are just going to be this, complete warren of interlocking caves that can be reinforced laterally and whatnot. It's just a hornet's nest. And the result is that he's going to hold out there on that island. How long does that battle go? I want to say it's on the order of. Go ahead, Seth.
I was going to say it goes into November, if I'm not mistaken. I mean, they're there for
it's like
a long
80
time.
days or something like that he draws it out, and his command is completely destroyed. If you actually measure just on combat troops, because there were some Japanese construction troops on Peleliu that tended to be taken in POW a little more easily because they were Formosan or Korean. But if you look at actual combat troops that surrendered on Peleliu, I think it's like 19 out of a garrison of 11,000. So his command, 99.8% casualties or something ridiculous like that. It's horrific. So he definitely executed Imperial GHQ's battle plan to a T, and inflicts upon us one of the few times in the Pacific War that we take a negative casualty ratio. It's like 0.8 to 1. We lose more people casualty wise than the Japanese garrison does. And for an army, it's awful. So gold star for awfulness. That's kind of what it comes down.
The other guy that we always talk about, we talked about at BIOC, but I could never remember his name. Who also instituted this honeycomb tactic, is what they call it. And I just did some real-time history. Kazumi Naoki is the guy's name. He was the colonel in charge of the Japanese defenses at BIOC. And he does a very similar thing that Nakagawa does, albeit later on in the campaign. He didn't set the campaign up to do that. He did it as the campaign was ongoing. But he, too, draws a lot of American blood, and this is why Eichelberger comes into the rescue and blah 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 blah. But that's the cat. I can never remember that dude's name.
Yeah, me neither. Yep. Cool. Next.
All right, Seth. I know that you're a big Navy guy in the Pacific. Let's talk about a few naval commanders here, like Mark Michener.
Yeah,
Mark Michener looks like an elf, doesn't he? Doesn't he look like a gnome?
Mark Michener looks like 60, but doesn't look a day over 80.
He looks like a gnome. He's got some questionable actions, and I know John's going to pile it on at Midway because he's captain of Hornet, and he lies.
He does.
Straight up lies. But when he comes into command of the fast carriers after Tarawa, after Galvanic, after November 43, when he replaces Charles Parnell, Michener comes into his own. He was an aviator, obviously. He had a special kinship with the aviators on all of his carriers, not just his flagship. They adored him. They loved Mark Mitcher because the aviator, of which I knew a lot of guys who flew for Mark Mitcher, they all said that they knew that if they were going down in the water, that Mitcher was going to send out the damn fleet to go find that one dude floating in the water, because he was not going to leave anybody behind.
Nice.
If it was within his power to do so, he was going to expend everything he could to bring these people home. And he was the first one who understood how to use the power that he had at his hands. So when he takes command of Task Force 58, because it's 58 under Spruance and 38 under Halsey, and he does work for Halsey too. But when he works for Spruance in Task Force 58, this is the most powerful weapon, power projection force the world has ever seen. And it's like this man was born to operate it. Like, he knew immediately what to do, how to do it, how to, finesse things out, how to have each different task group rotate and do all this stuff. And they're doing this on the fly too, by the way. And he's, just growing this Godzilla-esque monster into this just world-beating force.
Yeah.
And I mean, yeah, you can certainly give a lot of props to like guys like Jocko Clark and Davidson and Radford and people like that. His as you call him, John, his Panzer commanders.
Right.
But Mitcher's the guy that's telling them what to do. And he just has this grasp on this power that no one had ever had any kind of naval power like this in the history of mankind. And he just knew exactly how to use it, and exactly and precisely the right way. And I think he gets overshadowed by people like Spruance and Halsey, even though he worked for him, and because he does have a black mark at the beginning of the war.
Yeah. And that's no, and I have no quibbles with Mitcher at the end of the war. I do have quibbles with him at the Battle of Midway. There's this infamous incident called the Flight to Nowhere, where basically all of Hornet's air group, of which Mitcher was the captain, gets sent along the wrong search vector looking for fictional Japanese carrier group that's out there, and they end up, just completely wasting their air power. A lot of those aviators, some of them go into the drink. They do nothing during the first day of the battle, really. And he ends up gun decking his report afterwards, just kind of making stuff up about where it was that he went. And it seems as if he was grumpy about the fact that both of these fleets were being run by guys who were not carrier aviators. Frank Jack Fletcher and Spruance were both just gun dudes as far as he was concerned. And why is it that I'm having to take orders from non-aviators? But the result is that I've said this somewhat controversially in an article I wrote for the Naval War College Review, that Mark Mitcher is responsible for sinking the Yorktown. Okay. If Mark Mitcher had just followed his orders on the morning of 4 June and gone where Spruance told his air group to go, like as not, he would have found the Japanese first out of all of the air groups that went out there. Because if you look at his torpedo plane squadron, VT-8, which, gets shot down and everybody killed except for one guy left in the water, VT-8 was the first of the torpedo squadrons to attack the Japanese fleet. Realistically, you could think that Hornet's entire air group would have attacked the Japanese sometime around 09:20 in the morning.
Yeah.
If they do what they're supposed to do, they probably knock out 1 or 2 Japanese carriers, and then Enterprise and Yorktown's planes come in around 10:20 and finish the job, and the battle is over 4-zip before lunchtime. But as a result of the Flight to Nowhere, Yorktown is going to end up being sunk as a result of that, and it's really because Mitcher screwed up.
Yeah.
And it was clear that Spruance knew that he screwed up, and Mitcher, kind of gets shuffled out to pasture for the better part of a year and a half before his career is resurrected to go on to do the great things that he does later in the war. He's really lucky that Chester Nimitz was as forgiving a person as he was, because a lot of other guys would not have given Mark Mitcher that second chance. So there you go.
All right. So another Navy guy that people probably are more familiar with his son, and than they are with him, at least in the modern, more current generations. Yeah, John McCain Sr.
John McCain Sr. So when Spruance was in charge of Fifth Fleet and Task Force 58, the man we just talked about, Mitcher, is running the fast carriers. When Halsey, for the most part, not all the time, because as I said, Mitcher worked with Halsey too, specifically at Leyte Gulf. But when Halsey takes command of Fifth Fleet, that turns into Third Fleet, and 58 turns into 38, he brings his own carrier commander, who is this dude, John McCain. John McCain, basically, he does right seat, left seat with Mark Mitcher for a while to figure out, how do I control this? How do I teach Godzilla how to do tricks? Essentially. and it takes him a bit. I mean, admittedly, it does. It does take McCain a bit. But when he takes command, when Spruance and Mark go, on the beach for a smoke break, and Bill and John take over, he does very, very well. And the thing about McCain, probably more so than Mitcher, I would even say, is that McCain was an innovator. And while Mitcher listened to what his carrier commanders had to say, McCain was a little more apt to listen to some kind of oddball ideas. And he was willing to accept anything that anybody would put in front of him if it looked good. One of the guys that he had working for him was a guy that you may have heard of, Jimmy Thatch. Jimmy Thatch was, after Midway, he's a fighter pilot, of course, and after Midway, he becomes essentially a tactician for all intents and purposes. And he is the cat. Jimmy Thatch is the guy that comes up with what they call the big blue blanket, which is, I mean, it's simple in concept, but for whatever reason, it hadn't been done before. And this is how we're going to deal with kamikazes in the Philippine areas. We're just going to keep carrier planes in the air 24 hours a day over every airfield that we can find, and we're going to shoot and kill anything that walks, moves, or crawls. Simple idea, right? And this is Thatch that comes up with this, and that's a lot more complicated than it actually is. But Thatch comes up with the idea. McCain's like, sounds good, boom, do it. And for a while they do, it works, and then the Japanese evolve and they do different things. But McCain was he kind of got shuffled out to pasture for the wrong reasons. Of course, he dies like right after the surrender.
Yeah,
but he gets pilloried for Halsey's Typhoons, and wrongly so. Yeah. He's the scapegoat, and he was bitter about that because he's like, I was just following orders. I was following your damn orders.
Yeah.
So but McCain is he's on the level of Mark Mitcher. He wasn't the first one, but he dang sure was a good second bat. He's really, really good at what he does, and he learns fast. He comes in and he's like, I really don't know what I'm doing, but he picks it up quick, and he innovates. He's also the same guy that pushes for Navy night fighters more so than, and the deployment of, they were already in development, don't get me wrong, but the deployment of Navy night fighters in an effort to keep kamikazes to hell away from his carriers. And it's McCain that does this. When Spruance comes back, they adopt what McCain and Mitcher, they adopt what McCain had already worked out. So again, he was an innovator more so than Mark Mitcher, but Mark Mitcher was the master, and McCain was kind of the mad scientist, if you will, if you want to look at it like that.
All right. Cool. So this next guy, got another Japanese commander who people might be familiar with, but may not know that they are familiar with if they've seen the movie Letters from Iwo Jima.
Kuribayashi. Tadamichi. I think you'd have to say, if you tap the shoulder of Yamashita as Japan's greatest offensive general, I think you would have to tap this guy's shoulder as being their greatest defensive expert. He is the architect of the Battle of Iwo Jima. Really solid guy. Seems to be a pretty good human being. Had lived in the U.S. He spoke English. He had a real understanding of just what he was up against in terms of the Americans, in terms of our industrial potential and our mechanized, industrialized approach to warfare, I guess I would say. And the other thing I will say about him is that he really rode herd over his staff officers and got them to do what he wanted them to do. So he famously is like, we're not going to fight on the water's edge at all. We are going to give that up. We are going to let the Americans come ashore. We're going to let them pack the beaches, and then we're just going to wallop them with our artillery and turn those beaches into a killing zone. And there were people on his staff who were like, no, we can't do that. We got to fight at the water's edge. And he was like, okay, you're relieved. Go home. You're going to do, God damn it, you're going to do what I tell you to do. And we're going to fight this battle along my guidelines here. And his guidelines are, absolutely correct.
I was getting ready to say it's the right thing to do.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Yeah. He turns Iwo Jima again into one of these sort of labyrinthine defenses where the Japanese are going to fight entirely from underground in these cave and bunker systems that are both in underneath Mount Suribachi, but more of them are actually in the central Motoyama plateau in the center of the island. Just turns it into this warren of interlocking fires and whatnot, and draws the battle out for 45 days or something like that. And again, we get handed a 1-for-1 casualty ratio. And if you're the Americans and you're looking ahead to potentially doing an invasion of Japan proper, man, we're not happy about casualty ratios, which are edging down towards parity. If you look at the Battle of the Marianas, we were killing the Japanese at between 2 and 4 to 1, or at least inflicting casualties is a squishy word, right? When we say casualties, we mean killed, wounded, missing in action. Casualties in our parlance on the American side, typically we're going to get 1 killed for every 4 that's wounded, and then some percentage of POWs. Japanese casualties are overwhelmingly killed in action, but the total number of those casualties on Iwo Jima is roughly on par on both sides. So we lose 23,000 casualties, I think, in the course of that battle. The Japanese do as well. It's just that most of theirs are dead, whereas most of ours are wounded. Anyway, again, fast forwarding, if we're going to have to invade Japan proper, and they've got 2 million troops, in Japan, how many of these dudes are we going to have to kill before we finally get control over that island? It's a pretty daunting prospect. And Kurabayashi definitely caused us pause, I guess I would say.
I was gonna say that he even though the Japanese lose, there's a pause with the American public as well after Iwo Jima, where they're like, whoa, what in the heck just happened here? And may have achieved tactical loss, but maybe a little bit of
a moral victory.
That's a little bit of a moral victory on the home front.
Yeah, and the fact that he could draw that battle out as long as he did, outnumbered as heavily as he was. I mean, that too is an eye-opener, and that's going to extend then to the Battle of Okinawa, which likewise inflicts enormous casualties on us. So yeah, the moral is that the longer this war goes on, the bloodier and more awful it is becoming. And Iwo Jima is definitely a highlight of that. So
I don't want to get bogged down here because I'm keeping an eye on our time.
Yeah, let's go.
Real quick though, what are your guys' thoughts on letters from Iwo Jima and their depiction of the Japanese? Because I know that's going to be kind of people's connection with this guy.
Seth, I don't watch movies. I haven't seen the whole thing. I've seen snippets of it.
It's not good.
There you go.
It's not. It's not. I'm sorry. It shows. There's several scenes in the movie that are just farcical. In particular, one of the last scenes, and where this young Japanese rifleman pops up, and it's at the end of the campaign theoretically, and he pops up and he's surrounded by a platoon of Americans, and he's waving his rifle around, and those guys would have dropped him like a sack of dirt.
Yeah.
And then they go in and dug the teeth out of his head, and that's the God's honest truth. They wouldn't have sit there and said, "Come here, buddy. Give me a break." And they make the Japanese on Iwo Jima, for the most part, out to be these poor, pathetic creatures who. And I feel for any Japanese that fought on Iwo Jima, because I've been to Iwo. That place is a hellhole.
Yeah, it is.
but they make these guys out to be these poor little lost lambs, you know, who are against this, you know, evil, I don't want to say evil, but this juggernaut of American machinery. And it's a farce. And you know, from somebody who, I love his spaghetti westerns, Clint Eastwood, to make that movie, it's like, dude, you kind of missed the boat on that one. Now, Flags of Our Fathers is pretty good, I think. You know, it's a good representation of what those dudes went through. The some of them who were, of course, we know now weren't flag raisers, but regardless of that, it's a good representation of what happened to them on Iwo Jima and then what happened to them afterwards. But Letters from Iwo was skipped.
Yeah. Very good. All right.
All right. So let's get back. I'm going to throw these next two guys in together because I don't think you can really talk about one without talking about the other. And that's Holland Smith.
Yep.
And Ralph Smith.
Yep. Ralph Smith is the commander of 27th Infantry Division on Saipan. Holland Smith is the overall commander. He's a Marine general. Holland Smith ends up relieving Ralph Smith in the middle of that campaign, which leads to the infamous Smith versus Smith debate. I'm not a big fan of Holland Smith. I don't think Seth is either. I think this is a guy. Yeah, he's incredibly parochial. He is a Marine Corps bigot. Can't find a good word to say about the U.S. Army. And while I do have some quibbles with the performance of Ralph Smith's division on Saipan, I think that there were some extenuating circumstances there that had to do with how they were deployed by Holland Smith. Mm-hmm. I have no respect for the fact that Holland Smith did not go to the front lines to see for himself, not once, you know, what 27th Infantry Division was up against. And again, having Seth and I have both been to Saipan multiple times, when you see the terrain in Death Valley, holy Magilla. I mean, it is bad, you know.
It's rough. It's like a moonscape, you know, but surrounded on both sides by
I was going to say the same thing because I went to Saipan and did a series of videos there. And when you're standing on the south end of Death Valley, you've got Mount Tapachow off to the left. You've got Purple Heart Ridge off to the right. You're like, dang.
Dang, bro. It's bad.
Yeah, it's easy to sit on your ship and howl and say, you know, get your men
push
up
faster.
Oh my gosh. I don't know how anybody would have pushed up through that beast.
And it would have been good.
I was going to say 27th ID does not have all of its regiments online up there. And as Seth and I dug into in one of the episodes we did on this, the armor battalion that they had at their disposal, since they were the Corps Reserve, their battalion didn't have a lot of Shermans in it. It was mostly Stuarts. And man, you don't want to be driving no Stuart up into Death Valley. You know, that thing can get popped by a 37 millimeter anti-tank gun, let alone the 47s that they had up there. It's just yikes. The whole thing is evil. Anyway, Seth.
My thing with Ralph Smith, and I'll speak on him briefly, is that he was a weak commander. So, you know, he did not have very good tactical sense. He didn't. He was another one of these slow plodding United States. He and Walter Kruger would have been drinking buddies. You know, it takes him a month of Sundays to take Macon Island, Ralph Smith in the 27th, and there were very few Japanese there. And that initially draws Holland Smith's ire during Operation Galvanic. And he doesn't do himself any favors on Saipan either. And admittedly, John's 100% right. You know, they were deployed in the worst part of the island. They were not at full strength. But he doesn't do himself any favors. He's one of these guys that he knew all these regimental commanders and battalion commanders, like personally. I don't want to say all of them, but he knew most of them personally. And that's a problem, you know, because you don't want to relieve JD because he's a good guy.
Yeah.
Yeah, but JD's getting his people killed, so JD's got to go. You know, and he did not do that repeatedly.
Yeah.
And so I find fault with him there. Holland Smith is just a tool. He is. Anything that dude puts his fingers in, he stirs it up, man. And you know, pre-Operation Galvanic, pre-Tarrowham, Holland Smith is, you know, he's the one that tells Julian Smith, 2nd Marine Division commander, oh, hey, by the way, I'm holding back one of your regiments. So you're going to go hit this beach with 2 as opposed to your 3 infantry regiments because these are going to be corps reserve, not divisional reserve, corps reserve. So Julian Smith hits Tara with a 1-to-1 ratio. Not what you want.
Not what you want.
And then after the fact, Holland Smith blames the entire debacle on Batio, which, I mean, obviously we win, but he blames the bloodletting on the U.S. Navy for the lack of preparatory bombardment, which may or may not had something to do with it. But, you know, if you refuse to let your divisional commander, who repeatedly asked, mind you, for the reserve to utilize said reserve, and then you complain that it took them too long to take the island and they took too many casualties, well, who is it to blame if you won't let the man use the tools that he has? You, my brother. And he's an egotistical jackass who always finds fault with someone else, yet never takes the blame. And I have no respect for anybody who does that.
He ends up kind of wrecking himself because after Saipan, he kind of gets kind of quietly sidelined, doesn't he?
He gets kicked up into a role that he can't do any more harm from, because as a result of Smith versus Smith, the Army, just goes ballistic, and they send, a very high-ranking general out to the Pacific to figure out what the hell just happened here. And Nimitz, being a tremendous people person, just figures out that, again, the U.S. Army now has 1.7 million troops in this theater. The Marine Corps only accounts for 300,000 or 400,000 troops. If I've got a cat like Smith who cannot play nice with the Army, who, by the way, is responsible for all the logistical support of the Marine Corps as well, if this kid can't play nice, he's got to go someplace else, and I'll put somebody in who can. So that's what ends up happening to Holland Smith. Anyway.
All right. So, let's cluster these next 3 together. Ushijima, Cho, and Yahara.
Yeah. So these are the senior commanders in the Battle of Okinawa. Ushijima is the commander of 32nd Army at Okinawa. Cho is his chief of staff, and Yahara is his operations officer. Cho, and there's conflict between Cho, who is your classic ultra offensive minded Japanese army officer, and Yahara, who is trying to carry out this more defensive, defend in depth, honeycomb kind of tactics dude. And eventually Cho is going to convince Ushijima that we're going to put in a big counterattack at the beginning of May. 2 counterattacks, and he just throws away all of 32nd Army's reserves in the process of doing that, to absolutely no effect whatsoever.
Even if you look at him, Yahara looks like a very cerebral person, and Cho looks like a bulldog.
Ding. Yeah, exactly. And what that brings out is that Ushijima, while a very supposedly a genial individual, he did not have the spine that a guy like Kurobayashi had. If Kurobayashi had been running this battle, he would have told Cho, either shut up or just go kill yourself over there, get out of the way, because we're going to run this battle via Yahara's vision here, and they would have inflicted many more casualties on us than they already did, which was horrible enough. So, Anyway, that's who this trio is.
All right, and then wrapping things up here with Andrew Bruce.
Yeah, dude's awesome. He's 77th Infantry Division commanding general. He sees action at Guam, Leyte, and then, of course, Okinawa as well. Mm-hmm. Admiral Chester W. Nimitz called him the finest divisional commander that he had the pleasure to work with. Not U.S. Army divisional commander, the finest divisional commander I ever worked with. And that includes the United States Marine Corps.
Right.
He's another one of these dudes that is, his people think that he walks on water, and he's just this fiery guy who's this very genial kind of grandpa, father-like figure to his men. but to other guys, he's like, he's like, get out of my way. But he's just this bad dude. I mean, he's one of these good leaders do this. They force you to do your best without you even knowing that they're forcing you to do your best.
Yeah.
Right.
And he leads that charge around on Leyte through Ormoc, and they just blow through the back of the Japanese defenses on Leyte, and of course he sends the famous, and again he's kind of a smart ass, which endears him to me. And he comes he makes the run through Ormoc, and he sends a message back to, and it's meant for Joseph Swing and can't think of who was 7th ID commander at the time, but regardless, he makes it to the rally point, if you will, rendezvous point first with 77th, and he sends this smart aleck message, here I am, such and such, come 7, come 11. And he's talking, it's a dice game. He's talking about dice. I just rolled a 7 or 11 or something like that. And Walter Kruger, being Walter Kruger, sees this and calls Bruce from the battle, mind you, to his headquarters and chews him up for sending an inappropriate message. And this is why you suck, Kruger. And this is why Andrew Bruce is cool, because he got the job done and had a sense of humor doing it too at the same time. But his people love him. And you cannot find something that the 77th Infantry Division does wrong in the Pacific. You can't. I challenge you to. You can't. And it's all under this dude's leadership. He's an amazing guy. Absolutely amazing.
Tremendous trainer. Trained that division for every possible contingency. Just very smart, very awesome, aggressive. Dude. Yeah. And Seth says, if Chester Nimitz says this is the finest divisional commander in the theater and is looking past some other very fine divisional commanders in the U.S. Marine Corps, that speaks volumes.
Saying something.
Yeah, it is.
Pedro del Valle on Okinawa that's a guy we probably should have included. Pedro del Valle is, he's 11th Marine Commander on Guadalcanal, is artillery guy. Mm-hmm. And he comes in for Okinawa after Rupertus, and he's, brilliant. And again, this is on the same island. Yeah. But he's on the same island as Bruce, and Nimitz is saying, that's my boy right there.
Yeah, that's my boy, Eddie Bruce. Yeah.
That tells you something.
For sure.
All right, cool. Well, hey, we made it through.
Yeah,
man,
even on time and everything.
Yeah,
I had reserved judgment if not we were going to get through all that. I didn't think we'd get through it all.
I had my doubts about halfway through. I was like, oh man, we may
here we go.
Bit off more than we can chew here to get it done in 90 minutes, but we did it with 2 mintes to spare.
We have a question from the sideline though. What are you drinking, Seth?
Water.
You too.
Water. It's a little early in the day to be hitting the booze for me. I only had a link of food after lunch, so.
Right. I also wanted to just put in a quick comment for David Levine. Actually, Stanhope Ring was the air group commander on Hornet, not Yorktown's dive bomber commander. So, just slight correction there.
Oh, anyway, cool. Yeah, thanks, man.
Anyway, all right.
All right. Well, hey, I appreciate you guys coming on.
Yeah, this is fun.
I appreciate your podcast. I've learned so much. You don't know it, but it has benefited me much. In the times that I've gone to Pacific and filmed videos, I've got you guys in my ears. Getting prepped for that stuff. So I appreciate the work that you do.
Thank you very much. Appreciate the work you do too, man. You get some good stuff out there. It's awesome.
Absolutely.
Well, thank you. Appreciate that. All right. Well, there you go. There is a quick rundown on kind of a who's who of the Pacific. So you can kind of take any of those individuals there and do a deep dive on it. So you can latch on to Bruce. You can learn more about him and the battles that he was involved in, or some of these different Japanese commanders. And again, as I already said, make sure that you go and check out the Unauthorized History of the Pacific War podcast wherever you get your podcasts. They also have a YouTube channel where they stream all of their podcast. That is quite good. But anyway, with that, I think we're going to wrap it up. Thanks.